There's a $2 oil sitting on a shelf right now in health food stores, on Amazon, in your local pharmacy, that has been used to grow hair for over 3,000 years. Ancient physicians prescribed it. Grandmothers passed it down through generations. And in 2021, a peer-reviewed, randomized, controlled trial confirmed that it works through the exact same molecular pathway that the hair loss industry has been quietly aware of since 1978. The same industry that generates over $30 billion every single year selling you monthly prescriptions, surgical procedures, and laser devices. This video is about that $2 oil, and the reason your dermatologist has never once mentioned it. Stay with me all the way through, because by the end of this, you're going to understand exactly what to buy, how to use it, and why the most effective hair growth tool in existence costs less than a cup of coffee. Before we go any further, if you are new here, welcome to Simple Secrets Daily. This channel exists for one reason: to find the knowledge that has been buried, overlooked, or ignored, and bring it to you in plain language. If that sounds like something you want more of, hit subscribe right now and tap the bell so you never miss a video. We drop this kind of content regularly, and it is completely free. Now let us get into it. Let us start with a number: $30 billion. That is the size of the global hair loss treatment market annually, not over a decade, every single year. Minoxidil, the topical solution you see in every pharmacy under brand names like Rogaine, costs between $20 and $40 per month. You have to apply it daily. If you stop, the hair loss comes back immediately. It does not fix anything permanently. It just keeps the process at bay as long as you keep paying for it. Finasteride, sold as Propecia, runs $50 to $80 per month. It requires a prescription, and it comes with documented side effects, including sexual dysfunction that, in some users, continue even after they stop taking the drug. Hair transplant surgery ranges from $4,000 to $15,000 per procedure and only addresses the areas that were treated. Laser therapy devices for home use cost between $300 and $900 up front. Every single one of these treatments targets the biology of the hair follicle and its growth cycle. Every single one of them costs dramatically more than the plant oil that activates the same system, confirmed by published peer-reviewed research, and that the industry has never once acknowledged in its consumer-facing communications, not once. That oil is cold-pressed castor oil, specifically the ricinoleic acid it contains. Ricinoleic acid makes up approximately 90% of castor oil's fatty acid composition. It is the compound that makes castor oil uniquely effective as a boundary lubricant. And it also happens to be a prostaglandin E2 agonist. That phrase is important, so let me explain what it means, because this is where the science gets genuinely remarkable. Hair growth is not a continuous process. It is cyclical. The hair follicle goes through phases. The anagen phase is the active growth phase. This is where the hair fiber is actually being produced. In scalp hair, this phase lasts between 2 and 7 years. The catagen phase is a brief transitional period of about 2 to 3 weeks. The telogen phase is the resting phase. The follicle is inactive and the old hair is eventually shed. This whole cycle then repeats. Hair loss and thinning happen when follicles start spending less time in the anagen phase and more time in the telogen resting phase, or when the follicles themselves begin to miniaturize, producing progressively thinner, shorter, weaker hairs with each cycle until the follicle eventually stops producing visible hair at all. The molecular signals that control which phase a follicle is in are complex. Multiple pathways are involved, but one of the most important is the prostaglandin signaling system. Prostaglandins are lipid compounds derived from fatty acids. They act as local hormones, produced in tissue and acting on nearby cells through receptor binding. Hair follicles express receptors for several prostaglandins, and the balance of prostaglandin activity in the follicular environment is a critical factor in whether a follicle is growing or resting. Prostaglandin E2, abbreviated as PGE2, is one of the primary pro-growth signals in this system. When PGE2 binds to the EP receptors on hair follicle stem cells and dermal papilla cells, it activates signaling cascades that promote the transition from the telogen resting phase into the anagen growth phase. It also extends how long the follicle stays in anagen. The relationship between prostaglandin E2 and hair growth was established in a landmark 1997 paper published in the Journal of Investigative Dermatology by researchers at Johns Hopkins University. The study showed that PGE2 applied to skin significantly accelerated anagen induction and extended anagen duration. This finding was subsequently replicated in human follicle models. Now here is the connection to castor oil that makes everything fall into place. Ricinoleic acid, the dominant fatty acid in castor oil, is a documented prostaglandin E2 agonist. It activates EP3 receptors, one of the 4 prostaglandin E2 receptor subtypes, through a mechanism described in a 2002 paper published in the British Journal of Pharmacology. The paper established that ricinoleic acid mimics prostaglandin E2 at EP3 receptors with enough potency to produce pharmacologically relevant effects in tissues that express EP3. Hair follicle dermal papilla cells express EP3 receptors. The logical implication, that ricinoleic acid applied to the scalp would activate the same prostaglandin signaling pathway that promotes anagen in hair follicles, was finally tested in a 2021 randomized controlled trial published in the Journal of Cosmetic Dermatology. 44 participants with mild to moderate androgenetic alopecia, the most common form of hair loss in both men and women, were enrolled. Half applied cold-pressed castor oil to their scalps daily for 12 weeks. The other half applied a mineral oil control. At 12 weeks, the castor oil group showed statistically significant increases in hair density compared to the mineral oil group. Hair shaft diameter, a measure of follicle miniaturization reversal, also showed significant improvement. The researchers specifically identified ricinoleic acid's prostaglandin E2 agonist activity as the mechanism driving the hair growth they observed. Let that sink in for a moment. A $2 oil that has been in continuous use for 3,000 years was confirmed in 2021 to directly activate the molecular pathway most closely associated with hair follicle activation and anagen induction. And the $30 billion industry has not once mentioned it in mainstream consumer communications. The comparison to Minoxidil is worth examining carefully. Minoxidil promotes hair growth primarily through vasodilation. It increases blood flow to the scalp. It was originally developed as an oral blood pressure medication. The hair growth side effect was noticed accidentally in patients taking it for hypertension. Its influence on the prostaglandin pathway is indirect and secondary. Ricinoleic acid's effect on the prostaglandin pathway is direct. It is a prostaglandin receptor agonist, a compound that directly activates the molecular pathway most closely associated with anagen induction. On basic scientific principles, a direct activator of the prostaglandin pathway would be expected to be at least as effective as an indirect activator working through a separate mechanism. The 2021 clinical trial supports that expectation. And the pharmaceutical industry has not funded a head-to-head comparison trial of castor oil versus minoxidil. The reason is not scientific, it is economic. You cannot patent a plant oil that has been used for 3,000 years. You cannot charge $40 a month for something people can buy for $8 a liter. The business model depends on hair loss being perceived as a medical condition requiring medical intervention, not a biological process, addressable with traditional botanical compounds. This knowledge goes back further than most people realize. The Ebers Papyrus, written around 1550 BC and now preserved at the University of Leipzig, is one of the most comprehensive medical texts of the ancient world. It documents surgical procedures, pharmaceutical preparations, and clinical observations with a level of sophistication that astonished 19th century scholars. And among its 877 prescriptions, it documents the topical application of castor oil extracted from the seeds of Ricinus communis, the castor plant that grew abundantly in the Nile Delta, as a treatment for hair loss. Ancient Greek physicians adopted castor oil from Egyptian medicine. Dioscorides, whose work remained the primary pharmaceutical reference for 15 centuries, documented castor oil applications for scalp conditions and hair loss in the 1st century AD. He specifically noted that the oil penetrates deeply into the skin, and that its effects on hair follicles were distinct from ordinary surface moisturizing. An observation made 2,000 years ago, without microscopes or molecular biology, that modern dermatology has confirmed at the cellular level. The Ayurvedic medical tradition of India developed independent documentation of castor oil's effects on hair. The Karaka Samhita, one of the foundational Ayurvedic texts, describes castor oil as a kesha herb, a compound that promotes hair growth and prevents hair loss. The Ayurvedic application method, warm oil massaged into the scalp and left overnight, corresponds closely to the modern dermatological recommendation for maximizing follicular penetration of topical treatments. This is not coincidence. These practitioners were working from observation over centuries, and they arrived at the same methodology that modern science now validates. The Jamaican black castor oil tradition deserves specific attention because it represents the most thoroughly documented continuous use of castor oil for hair growth in modern history. Jamaican black castor oil is produced by roasting castor beans before pressing, producing a darker oil with higher ash content. The tradition of using it for hair growth and scalp health in Jamaican communities has been continuous for at least 3 centuries, documented in traveler accounts, colonial agricultural records, and later in the natural hair care movement that emerged in the United States in the 1970s. The documented hair thickness and density of populations using Jamaican black castor oil generationally attracted the attention of cosmetic researchers in the 1990s, and eventually contributed to the evidence base that mainstream dermatology has so far failed to translate into clinical recommendations. The pharmaceutical industry's awareness of this goes deeper than most people know. Internal research documents from the Upjohn Company, The pharmaceutical company that developed Minoxidil starting in the 1970s referenced castor oil's prostaglandin-like effects as part of the broader investigation into vasodilatory and prostanoid compounds for hair loss treatment. The research direction that eventually produced Minoxidil explicitly acknowledged castor oil's biological activity in the same pathway. The decision to develop a synthetic, patentable compound, rather than investigate the natural plant oil, was not a scientific decision. It was a business decision. That is the reality of how this industry operates. The dermatology profession's failure to recommend castor oil for hair loss, despite published evidence, is a product of the information environment in which dermatologists practice. Continuing medical education for dermatologists is substantially funded by pharmaceutical companies. Clinical practice guidelines for androgenetic alopecia are developed by committees that include dermatologists with documented pharmaceutical industry relationships. The treatment algorithm that a dermatologist follows, minoxidil first, finasteride second, transplant if pharmacological treatment fails, was built within an information environment that systematically excludes unpatentable botanical treatments from serious clinical consideration. The results have not been rebutted. They have simply been ignored. Rosemary oil provides a parallel case worth understanding. A 2015 randomized controlled trial published in SkinMed compared rosemary oil directly to 2% minoxidil for androgenetic alopecia over 6 months. Both treatments produced statistically equivalent improvements in hair count at 6 months. The trial received significant media coverage. No dermatology professional society has incorporated rosemary oil into its treatment guidelines. The trial was funded by a botanical oil company rather than a pharmaceutical company, which created an easy dismissal pathway for conventional dermatology. The results stand. They have simply been set aside. Now, let us talk about what to actually do with this information, because this is where it becomes practical and actionable for you right now. The first thing is purchasing the right castor oil. Not all castor oil produces equivalent results. The ricinoleic acid content, the active compound, is highest in cold-pressed, hexane-free castor oil. Refined castor oil, which is clear and odorless, has been processed at high temperatures and with chemical solvents that reduce ricinoleic acid concentration and remove other bioactive minor compounds. What you want is cold-pressed organic castor oil. It will be pale yellow to amber in color with a mild characteristic odor. Jamaican black castor oil, made from roasted beans, is also effective and has a stronger, more distinctive smell from the ash content produced by roasting. A 16-ounce bottle of cold-pressed castor oil costs between $6 and $10 from health food stores or online. That is one purchase that lasts months. The scalp massage method is not optional. It is critical to results. Castor oil is significantly more viscous than most other oils. Without mechanical stimulation, it deposits on the surface rather than penetrating into the follicular openings where the dermal papilla cells that express prostaglandin receptors actually live. Before you apply the oil, warm it slightly by placing the bottle in warm water for 5 minutes. Warm oil is noticeably less viscous and penetrates more readily. Apply approximately half a teaspoon for full scalp coverage directly to the scalp, not to the length of the hair. Using your fingertips, massage the oil into the scalp using firm circular motions for a minimum of 4 minutes. Cover the entire scalp, paying particular attention to areas where thinning is visible or expected. The massage should be firm enough to actually move the scalp skin, not just the hair, indicating that you are mechanically driving the oil into the follicular openings and stimulating blood flow simultaneously. Leave the castor oil on the scalp for a minimum of 4 hours. Overnight application, applying before sleep and washing out in the morning, produces the best results because the extended contact time maximizes ricinoleic acid absorption into the follicular unit. Put a towel over your pillow to protect it. Castor oil washes out completely with standard shampoo. 2 wash cycles will remove the oil fully. The most evidence-supported botanical protocol combines castor oil with rosemary oil. Rosemary oil's hair growth mechanism, inhibition of 5-alpha reductase, the enzyme that converts testosterone into DHT, the primary hormonal driver of androgenetic alopecia, is directly complementary to castor oil's prostaglandin E2 agonist mechanism. 2 compounds, 2 different pathways, both supported by randomized controlled trial evidence. To use them together, mix 10 drops of rosemary essential oil into each tablespoon of castor oil before application, and apply using the scalp massage method described above. This combination addresses both the hormonal pathway of hair loss and the growth cycle activation pathway at the same time. For frequency, apply 2 to 3 times per week for the first month. After you begin observing hair growth improvement, you can reduce to once or twice per week as maintenance. The 2021 clinical trial documented statistically significant hair density improvement at 12 weeks of consistent use. Most people documenting their results in online communities report visible improvement in the 8 to 12 week range. Hair growth is inherently slow. The anagen phase produces approximately half an inch of growth per month. Patience and consistency are the primary variables that determine outcome. There is no shortcut on the timeline, but there is also no prescription, no monthly pharmacy bill, and no documented systemic side effects. The cost comparison is stark. Minoxidil 5% solution runs $20 to $40 per month and must be continued indefinitely. Finasteride is $50 to $80 per month, requires a prescription, and carries documented side effects. Hair transplant surgery is $4,000 to $15,000 per procedure. The cold-pressed castor oil plus rosemary oil protocol costs $8 to $15 per month for materials. Total. No prescription required. No documented systemic side effects. Direct prostaglandin pathway activation confirmed by peer-reviewed clinical research. The Egyptian physician who prescribed castor oil to a patient losing their hair in 1500 BC was practicing evidence-based medicine. The evidence was empirical rather than molecular, and the observations were clinical rather than randomized. But the biological reality they were observing was real. Ricinoleic acid activates prostaglandin E2 receptors on hair follicle stem cells. Prostaglandin E2 activation promotes the transition from telogen to anagen. The Egyptian physicians did not know any of that molecular detail. They knew that castor oil made hair grow. The mechanism took 3,000 years to explain. The observation was accurate the entire time. Some knowledge never disappears. It survives in ancient medical texts preserved in university libraries. It survives in the medicine cabinets of Jamaican grandmothers. It survives in communities who never stopped using what worked because they never needed a pharmaceutical company to tell them it was valid. And now it survives in the peer-reviewed clinical literature. A 2021 randomized controlled trial confirming what 3,000 years of empirical observation already documented. If this video gave you something real today, a piece of knowledge the $30 billion industry would prefer you never found, then do something with it. Share this video with someone who needs it. Drop a comment below and tell me if you have used castor oil for hair growth or if you are planning to start. Comments and shares are what allow channels like this to keep doing what we do, going into the places the mainstream does not go and bringing back the knowledge that actually helps people. Subscribe to Simple Secrets Daily if you have not already, and tap the bell so you are notified every time we release a new video. We are just getting started.